The habit that determines your future may not be your ability to avoid every fall. It may be your willingness to return after one. You know the moment. You promised yourself you would rise early, but the alarm sounded and you stayed in bed. You planned to exercise, save money, finish the work, make the call, and you did not do it. Then comes the dangerous thought, there I go again. I have ruined it. I suppose this is simply who I am. Now listen carefully. You broke a commitment. That matters. But breaking a commitment is not the same as being permanently broken. One is an event that requires correction. The other is a verdict that leaves no room for correction. And too many people confuse the event with the verdict. Imagine driving toward an important destination and missing a turn. The missed turn has a consequence. You have lost some time. You may have added distance. You may need to admit that you were distracted and should have paid closer attention. But you would never say, I missed one turn, so this road must now become my home. No. You check your direction, you make the correction, you return to the road. Here's the truth. A wrong turn becomes a destination only when you continue long enough to accept it as one. A missed morning is not a ruined year. A poor decision is not a permanent character. A week of inconsistency is not proof that discipline is beyond you. But if you use the mistake as permission to keep moving in the wrong direction, then one lapse begins building a pattern. Do you see the difference? Relief does not mean pretending the mistake was harmless. Responsibility does not mean condemning yourself forever. Relief says, I can still return. Responsibility says, then I must return. And returning is not magic. It is not a sudden wave of motivation. It is a discipline of its own. You can learn to interrupt shame, examine what failed, correct the structure, and take the next useful action before disappointment becomes a season. Your past choice has already been made. Your next choice has not. That is where your power is. But before we learn the road back, we must examine the moment when one wrong turn becomes something far more damaging, a verdict about who you are. That verdict usually begins with a small change in language. You stop saying, I failed to keep this commitment, and begin saying, I am a failure. You stop describing what happened and start defining who you are. The first statement is a fact you can address. The second is an identity you feel condemned to obey. And the mind can build that identity quickly. It collects the morning you slept late, the project you abandoned, the promise you postponed, the plan you announced and never completed. Then it ties those separate moments together and says, see, this is the kind of person you are. A handful of wrong turns becomes a story that says you were never capable of reaching the destination. Now, imagine a friend who repeatedly promises to arrive and repeatedly does not appear. They say they will help, then disappear. They say they will repay what they owe, then avoid the conversation. How long before you stop depending on their word? Not because you hate them, not because they have no value. You simply have too much evidence that their promises are unsafe to build upon. The same thing happens privately. Every time you make a commitment to yourself and quietly abandon it, you teach yourself what to expect from your own word. After enough repetition, you hesitate to set meaningful goals because some part of you remembers what happened to the others. Here's why this matters. Self-trust cannot be restored through compliments alone. You can stand before a mirror and declare that you are focused, powerful, and disciplined. But if your actions keep presenting contrary evidence, the speech will not settle the argument. Trust grows when your behavior gives your words something solid to stand on. There are two mistakes to avoid. The first is pretending the lapse meant nothing. It did mean something. A promise was broken. The second is deciding it means everything. It does not prove that change is impossible. Hold both truths at once. The action was wrong, and the identity is unfinished. You are not excused from correction, but neither are you disqualified from growth. Your identity is not a stone tablet handed down by yesterday. It is a living record, and today is still writing in it. But how does one disappointing action become such a powerful verdict? It does not happen all at once. It happens through a predictable cycle. Disappointment becomes shame, shame becomes avoidance, and avoidance begins manufacturing more evidence for the very identity you fear. Here is how the cycle works. You break a commitment and disappointment appears. If disappointment remains information, it can teach you. But if disappointment becomes condemnation, shame enters. Shame tells you to hide. Hiding produces avoidance. Avoidance leads to another broken commitment. And now you have fresh evidence for the belief that you cannot trust yourself. That is the collapse cycle. Disappointment, shame, avoidance, repetition, self-doubt. Suppose you decide to write every morning. For several days, you sit down and do the work. Then one morning you miss. Perhaps you were tired. Perhaps the plan was poorly protected. Perhaps you simply chose comfort. Whatever the reason, the page remains empty. Now, the first problem is one missed practice. But then you see the tracker on your desk and you turn it face down because you do not want the reminder. The next morning, you avoid the desk altogether. By the third morning, you tell yourself the week has already been spoiled. So you choose Monday as the day you will begin again. Monday comes, but now returning feels heavier. You are no longer carrying one missed morning. You are carrying the shame of the entire week. Then comes the dramatic promise. Next time I will wake up 2 hours earlier. I will write twice as much. I will exercise, read, plan, and reorganize my whole life before breakfast. It sounds powerful, but often it is guilt wearing the costume of ambition. The promise briefly makes you feel repaired, yet it creates a plan so heavy that another collapse becomes likely. Do you see what happened? The first wrong turn did not take you far from the road. Shame did. Shame persuaded you to stop checking the map. It told you that because you were off course, you might as well keep driving. Then every additional mile seemed to confirm that you had always been lost. But shame is not payment. Feeling terrible for 7 days does not repay the promise you broke on the first day. Punishment is not correction. Avoidance is not accountability. And a larger promise is not necessarily a better plan. The unfinished commitment remains inside you because the argument has never been settled. You know what you intended. You know what you avoided. And until action enters the conversation, the mind keeps returning to the question, can I depend on myself? So catch the cycle early. Stop adding interpretation. State what happened, then take one corrective action while the mistake is still small. One person misses a day and says, this proves I cannot change. Another says, this shows me where the plan failed. One turns disappointment into a lifestyle. The other turns it into a lesson. The difference is not that one person feels no regret. The difference is that regret becomes direction. The moment facts replace condemnation and action replaces avoidance, the cycle begins to lose its power. And that brings us to the next discipline. A form of honesty that neither excuses the wrong turn nor punishes the traveler. It simply tells the truth, accepts the consequence, and prepares the return. Honest accountability begins when you stop making the mistake larger or smaller than it is. You do not hide it. You do not decorate it. You do not turn it into a speech about your entire life. You tell the truth about 3 things: what you promised, what you actually did, and what your choice affected. Use 3 clean sentences. I committed to completing this task by Friday. I avoided it and did not finish. Now the work is late. Someone else has been inconvenienced and I must repair that. That is accountability. It has edges. It has facts. It has somewhere to go. Compare that with the language of shame. I always ruin everything. I never follow through. I am hopeless. Those words may sound like honesty because they are painful, but pain does not automatically make a statement true. Always, never, and hopeless add emotional weight without adding useful direction. They describe a courtroom, not a road home. Now, you must also learn the difference between an explanation and an excuse. An explanation says, I scheduled this badly. I left the distraction within reach. I was exhausted and failed to reduce the task. I chose comfort when I could have acted. An explanation identifies something you can change. An excuse says, because that condition existed, there was nothing I could do. It uses the reason to surrender responsibility. Do you see the difference? The explanation helps you redesign the next attempt. The excuse gives the same failure permission to return. And sometimes accountability requires more than private reflection. If your delay burdened another person, apologize without defending yourself. If you left work unfinished, complete what can still be completed. If you neglected your health, your finances, or your surroundings, begin restoring what was allowed to deteriorate. Responsibility becomes credible when it moves from language into repair. But listen carefully. Facing the consequence is not the same as inventing additional suffering. If you missed one workout, the answer is not to punish your body with an impossible session. If you overspent, the answer is not to call yourself worthless for a month. If you spoke carelessly, the answer is not endless self-hatred. The answer is acknowledgement, repair, and a better next choice. You do not become more responsible by suffering longer than the consequence requires. You become more responsible by responding more accurately. Accountability is like stopping on the roadside and locating your exact position. You may not like where you are. You may wish you had turned sooner. But an honest location is useful. A dramatic accusation is not. Once you know where you are, the question changes. You stop asking, what is wrong with me? And begin asking, what allowed this breakdown to happen? That question leads us from judgment to diagnosis, and diagnosis is where a wiser return begins. Now become an investigator, not a prosecutor. A prosecutor gathers evidence to prove guilt. An investigator gathers evidence to understand what happened and prevent it from happening again. Your return post-mortem should be brief, honest, and useful. If it ends without an adjustment, it was not an investigation. It was merely another way to remain still. Start with the first question. Was the commitment too large? Perhaps you decided to wake early, exercise for an hour, read, write, plan your day, and change your diet, all beginning on the same Monday. That is not necessarily greater discipline. It may be too much ambition resting on too little structure. A plan that functions only when energy is high and life is quiet is not yet a reliable plan. Second, was the environment unprotected? Was the time clearly chosen? Was the equipment ready? Was the document open? Was the phone close enough to interrupt you? Did you require yourself to make 6 small decisions before the real work could begin? Every unnecessary obstacle gives reluctance another place to negotiate. A good intention in a careless environment is forced to fight battles that preparation could have prevented. Third, was your capacity genuinely reduced? Perhaps you were exhausted. Perhaps responsibilities accumulated. Perhaps the plan ignored the reality of that season. Be truthful here. Fatigue is real, but so is ordinary reluctance. One asks for recovery or a smaller standard. The other asks for action despite discomfort. Wisdom is learning not to confuse them. Fourth, was the priority clear? When 2 demands appeared, did you know which one mattered more? Or did the urgent, easy, and visible task push aside the quiet work connected to your future? If everything is called important, convenience will usually make the decision. Fifth, did you simply choose avoidance? Sometimes the plan was reasonable. The time was available. The environment was prepared. You were capable of beginning, and you still chose not to. Do not redesign a workable system to avoid admitting a choice. Responsibility must remain in the room. Suppose your commitment was to write every morning, and after 1 week the practice disappeared. The postmortem may reveal that you demanded 1,000 words before breakfast, never selected an exact starting time, and left your phone beside the notebook. That is a design problem. Or perhaps the target was modest, the desk was ready, and you spent the hour avoiding discomfort. That is a choice problem. Both can be corrected, but they require different corrections. One needs a smaller target and a protected time. The other needs an immediate act of obedience to the commitment already made. Here's the truth. I have no discipline is too vague to repair. My target was too large can be repaired. My time was undefined can be repaired. I left the distraction within reach can be repaired. I chose avoidance can be confronted. End the postmortem with one change. Reduce the target. Fix the time. Prepare the environment. Remove the distraction. Face the choice. One cause. One adjustment. Now you know where the road bent and why you left it. But a diagnosis, however accurate, does not move your feet. Explanation can point toward the road. Only action can place you back on it. The return must now become physical, specific, and immediate. Here is the return protocol. 3 moves, performed in order. Correct, reduce, schedule. First, correct the direction with one immediate action. Do not wait for confidence. Do not wait for Monday. Do not wait until you have forgiven yourself, reorganized the room, and discovered a new philosophy of life. The longer you wait, the larger the return appears. Action makes it small again. If you abandon the document, open it and write 1 paragraph. If you stopped moving your body, take a short walk. If you neglected your savings, transfer an amount you can responsibly afford. If a relationship was damaged, send the message that begins the repair. The action does not need to erase the consequence. It needs to point in the right direction. You are not trying to complete the entire journey in one afternoon. You are turning the vehicle around. Second, reduce the standard. This is where pride often interferes. You say, but I used to do an hour. I used to write 10 pages. I used to follow the full routine. Perhaps you did. But the question is not what you once did under better conditions. The question is what you can reliably resume now. Choose a minimum that preserves the meaning of the commitment and can survive a difficult day. 10 minutes of movement, 1 paragraph of writing, a few pages of reading, 1 deliberate financial action, 1 honest conversation. The minimum is not your final ambition. It is the doorway back into motion. A small promise kept is more valuable to recovery than a magnificent promise abandoned. One gives you evidence. The other gives you another speech. An impressive restart tries to erase guilt through intensity. It says, I will make up for everything today. A reliable restart restores continuity. It says, I will do something meaningful today and I will be able to do it again tomorrow. Do you see the difference? One is emotional repayment. The other is disciplined rebuilding. Third, schedule the next repetition. Not soon, not when I have time, not tomorrow somehow. Choose the hour, choose the place, prepare the first step. If you will write at 7 in the morning, place the notebook on the desk tonight. If you will walk after work, prepare what you need before leaving home. If you will review your finances on Saturday, put it on the calendar and gather the information beforehand. A commitment without an appointment is still vulnerable to negotiation. Now let us put the 3 moves together. Suppose you intended to study each evening, but you have avoided it for 2 weeks. You begin by correcting. Tonight you open the material and study 1 page. Then you reduce. For the next several days, the minimum is 10 focused minutes, not the ambitious hour that kept being postponed. Then you schedule. Tomorrow at 7:30 at the kitchen table, with the phone in another room and the material already open. Correct, reduce, schedule. Notice what you are not doing. You are not adding an exercise plan, a new diet, an early morning routine, and 4 other disciplines because guilt has made you impatient. You are repairing 1 agreement. Trust is rebuilt 1 kept promise at a time. And in this phase, success is not a dramatic result. Success is not finishing the book, transforming the body, or recovering every lost opportunity. Success is new evidence. Evidence that you can act before you feel ready. Evidence that you can choose a standard you will honor. Evidence that your word has begun to carry weight again. 1 immediate correction changes today's direction. One reduced standard makes tomorrow possible. One scheduled repetition protects the return from becoming another good intention. But tomorrow will bring moods, distractions, and competing demands. If the return depends on winning the same argument every day, it remains fragile. Immediate action puts you back on the road. Structure is what keeps the next difficult morning from pulling you off it again. Think again about the road. A guardrail does not choose your destination. It does not hold the steering wheel. It does not remove your responsibility to pay attention. Its purpose is simpler. When you drift for a moment, it keeps that moment from becoming a disaster. Your returning discipline needs guardrails. Start with a stable time and place. If the action happens whenever you find time, every day begins with a negotiation. When will I do it? Where will I do it? Should I do it now or later? And later has defeated many good intentions. Choose the appointment in advance. Read at the same chair after breakfast. Walk when you arrive home from work. Review the plan at the desk before opening messages. A fixed setting does not make the action effortless, but it removes several decisions that once stood between you and the beginning. Then prepare the first physical step. Put the shoes where you will see them. Leave the notebook open to a clean page. Place the book beside the chair. Move the distracting device out of reach. Gather tomorrow's materials tonight. That is not greater willpower. That is a wiser arrangement. Now decide what the difficult day version will be before the difficult day arrives. Do not let the tired version of you rewrite the agreement under pressure. Decide while calm. If the day becomes crowded, I will still do 10 minutes. If I cannot complete the full session, I will complete the minimum. If the usual place is unavailable, I will use this alternative. You are not lowering the destination. You are protecting the direction. And guard yourself against impatience. Once you keep the returning discipline for several days, you may feel tempted to add 3 more. Do not confuse renewed enthusiasm with established structure. Protect the first promise until it can stand without constant drama. 1 reliable discipline is a foundation. 5 fragile disciplines are 5 new places to collapse. Keep a simple record, a mark on the calendar, a line in a notebook, nothing elaborate. You are not demanding visible transformation every morning. You are collecting evidence that you appeared, acted, and honored the minimum again. Here's the truth. Structure does not replace responsibility. Moving the phone does not write the paragraph. Preparing the shoes does not take the walk. Scheduling the hour does not perform the work. Structure lowers friction. You must still step forward. But that step becomes easier to repeat when the road is marked, the first move is prepared, and the difficult day rule has already been decided. The emotional urgency of the restart will fade. That is expected. The structure remains after the feeling leaves. And even with strong guardrails, another slip may occur. Life will interrupt. Attention may wander. You may make another poor choice. The second slip is where this new philosophy receives its real test, because now you must decide whether recovery was merely something you tried once or a discipline you are truly learning. The second slip can feel more discouraging than the first. After the first, you built the plan, prepared the environment, and began collecting evidence. Then you miss again, and a voice says, "There it is. Nothing has changed. All that progress was false." Do not believe that conclusion. Recovery is itself a discipline. And like every discipline, it becomes dependable through practice, not through one perfect performance. You are not learning how to create a life in which nothing interrupts you. You are learning how to respond when interruption comes. At this moment, avoid 2 dangerous reactions. The first is abandonment. The system was not flawless, so the system failed. But no guardrail promises that the vehicle will never drift. Its value is revealed in how far the drift is allowed to go. The second is punishment. I missed once, so tomorrow I must do twice as much. That response turns guilt into workload. It makes the next repetition heavier, raises the resistance, and often prepares the conditions for another failure. Instead, return to the sequence. State the fact. Identify the cause. Make one adjustment. Perform the minimum action. Schedule the next repetition. No drama, no disappearance, no grand reinvention. And pay attention if you keep failing at the same point. If every breakdown happens on Friday evening, during travel, after poor preparation, or when another demand appears, that is information, perhaps the difficult day version is still too large. Perhaps the time is poorly chosen. Perhaps the commitment loses whenever it competes with a priority you have never honestly named. Repeated failure at the same location is not a reason for vague self-condemnation. It is a request for a more accurate design or a more honest decision about what truly matters. Also, watch for overconfidence. After a successful stretch, people often stop preparing. The shoes are no longer ready. The time becomes flexible. The phone returns to the desk. One exception appears, then another, and soon the old negotiation is back in business. Progress does not make structure unnecessary. Progress is what the structure was protecting. Here's the truth. A reliable traveler is not someone who never misses a turn. It is someone who notices sooner. They do not drive another 100 miles because pride refuses to admit the mistake. They look, correct, and continue. That is your new measure. Not did I perform perfectly, but how quickly did I return? Not did I feel ashamed enough, but what did I correct? Not was the road uninterrupted, but did I preserve the direction? When your returns begin to outnumber your disappearances, something deeper than a routine starts changing. You begin rebuilding the most important relationship you carry everywhere, the relationship with your own word. Confidence is often misunderstood. People think confidence means believing that nothing will go wrong. But that kind of confidence is fragile because life only has to interrupt the plan once to destroy it. Durable confidence says something different. Problems may come. I may become tired. I may make a poor decision. But I know how to face what happened, understand it, and return. That is not wishful thinking. It is trust supported by evidence. Every time you complete a return, you place another piece of evidence into the relationship you have with your own word. You said you would come back, and you came back. You said you would perform the minimum, and you performed it. You said you would appear at the appointed time, and you appeared. One action may feel small, but repeated actions begin to answer a very large question. Can I depend on myself when life becomes difficult? Fragile confidence depends on the unbroken streak. As long as every mark remains perfect, it feels strong. But once the streak breaks, the person believes the identity has broken with it. Resilient confidence depends on the practiced return. It values consistency, but it does not worship perfection. It protects the routine, but it knows how to repair the routine. It does not say, I never lose direction. It says, I do not remain lost. And this identity cannot be built by declaration alone. You may say, I am disciplined, but the words need a record behind them. Each small action is a vote. Each return is a vote. Each promise kept under ordinary conditions is a vote. Repeated long enough, those votes begin shaping the person who cast them. Now consider the person you will become in the years ahead. That future person will inherit something from today. They may inherit the accumulated consequences of avoidance, unfinished work, weakened trust, and opportunities left unattended. Or they may inherit the accumulated strength of corrected choices, steadier habits, clearer judgment, and the knowledge that setbacks do not have final authority. You are sending one of those inheritances forward with what you repeat. Here's the truth we began with. A disciplined person is not a flawless person. A disciplined person simply refuses to build a permanent home inside a temporary failure. They acknowledge the wrong turn. They learn from the road. They place their hands back on the wheel. Your past matters. The consequences are real. Some distance may need to be recovered, but the direction is still open. That is mature confidence, not confidence that you will never fall, but confidence that you will not abandon yourself when you do. Now the philosophy is complete. What remains is to turn it into action, not someday, not after another speech, but through one bounded return within the next 24 hours. Choose one broken promise, not every neglected area, not your entire life. One promise whose repair would begin restoring your respect for your own word. Write one factual sentence about it. I committed to this action and I stopped doing it. No excuse, no identity label, no speech about always or never, just the truth. Then choose the most accurate cause. Was the standard too large? Was the time unclear? Was the environment unprotected? Was your capacity depleted? Was the priority confused? Or did you simply choose avoidance? Write one adjustment beside the cause, one correction. Now perform a corrective action within the next 24 hours. Make it small if necessary. Make it imperfect. Make it invisible to everyone else, but make it real. Open the page. Take the walk. Make the transfer. Finish the task. Begin the apology. Then reduce the standard to something you can repeat. Choose the exact time. Choose the exact place. Prepare the first step before the appointment arrives. And for now, track only the next 7 completions. Do not add 5 new goals because the first 3 days feel encouraging. Do not demand visible transformation before the structure has had time to stand. Collect 7 pieces of evidence that you returned. Remember the full movement. Separate the action from your identity. Interrupt shame before it becomes avoidance. Tell the truth without staging a trial. Diagnose the cause. Correct immediately. Reduce the standard. Prepare the environment. Schedule the next repetition. And if you slip again, repeat the return. That is discipline in its mature form. The wrong turn will remain part of your history. You do not need to deny it. You do not need to pretend the lost distance never mattered. But history is not the steering wheel. Your hands are back on it now. The road ahead does not ask whether yesterday was perfect. It asks which direction you will travel next. One honest correction can become one completed promise. One completed promise can become new evidence. New evidence can become trust. And trust, repeated long enough, can become a different life. So stop rehearsing the moment you failed. Locate the road, choose the next mile, and begin the return.